Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast. Ian's gone to get himself a cup of juice. He said, "Anyone that's watched the big club dinner, we don't know whether that's going to come in a decanter or not." While we wait for Ian, we've got we've got some opening credits now for the podcast, which is very exciting. So, without further ado, here we go.
Nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down. My brothers on the ground, I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me.
So there you go. What did you think of our opening credits, Ian?
That was delightful.
Good.
I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Good.
I always think that song always reminds me of like Aerogram.
It's good. It's Wooden Tooth who do the theme tune to our podcast. That's the full version of Coyote by Wooden Tooth. But welcome everybody to the Scottish Rugby podcast brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black. And we're currently broadcasting live on Facebook, facebook.com/Scottish Rugby blog. We're on youtube.com/Scottish Rugby blog and twitch.tv/Scottish Rugby podcast. This week's podcast, we're going to look at plans for the autumn internationals and finishing the Six Nations. We've got the recent announcement that the Lions tour to South Africa is going ahead. doing some health checks on the Edinburgh and Glasgow squads. Ian's delighted about that. And also picking up some other bits of news from the world of rugby in general. Joining me to discuss all of this, you'll know him well. It's contributed to the blog as well as the Offside Line. It's Ian Hay.
Hello. I'd actually left my mic on mute there. And I didn't realise that. Yes, hello everyone. How are we? I hope we're good.
Have you recovered from the big club dinner, Ian? Ian's frozen.
Absolutely, yes. I've had a good rest period as goes by the SRB protocols.
That's good. Good, you've fully recovered. That's good.
We have play-by podcast protocols, so I've had my rest. I'm good.
You're ready to return. That's good. We've had some really nice feedback from the big club dinner. So thank you to everybody that watched and contributed to that, and well done for raising money for your clubs. Particular shout out to Strathmore Rugby Club, who opened their clubhouse for the night and had us on the big screen. So apologies to them for the for the standard of entertainment. Particularly, I hope you all enjoyed name that tune at the end. I think that particularly went down well. A lot of praise in the comments for my piano skills anyway. You can watch that back on our YouTube channel as well as Facebook and Twitch as well if you want to. We're going to, at some point, I need to put it out as an audio podcast, but we're just going to leave it to tease you for a little bit to kind of leave it with people that have watched the video. You can watch all the speeches as well on YouTube. We put them all up individually as well, so you don't have to troll through the whole dinner to see them. In return, all we're asking for is a small donation to your local rugby club or My Name's Doddy. And what we've decided to do is, following the success of that, we're going to carry on doing these live. If Ian can avoid swearing, that would be helpful. After 9 o'clock, go on, Ian. After 9 o'clock, you can have one. But
I don't have to swear,
that's good.
I've served on time in call centres.
Personal
I can
growth.
be professional. Ish.
If we're going to carry on doing it in this format, though, we're going to need some support. So we've started our very own Patreon. And I know every podcast has one, so we thought it was time for us to do one too. So for about the price of one beer a month, you can help support us keep making these podcasts. We're not asking for money for nothing either, because in return for your support, you get ad-free audio versions of the podcast, monthly exclusive content, which is probably going to be question and answer sessions or something like that we'll record after one of our podcasts, and access to our super secret Facebook page where you can chat with ourselves and other listeners. If you visit patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast, or if you go to the blog scottishrugbyblog.co.uk, you'll find details of it. There are 2 payment options for £3 a month, which I think is less than a pint of beer these days. I've got kids. I don't go out to pubs anymore. That's less than a pint, Ian.
Oh, God, yes. I mean, obviously, I've not been to a pub for a while, but even before then, you're lucky if you're paying under £4 for a decent pint these days.
So less than the price of a pint of beer.
Unless you went to Wetherspoons, and let's be honest, not a lot of us want to go there at the moment.
No. So for £3 a month, you get pitch side access to the Richie Vernon Thunderdome. So that gets you the ad-free podcast, monthly exclusive content, and access to the Facebook page. But if you pay £5, you get access not only to the Richie Vernon Thunderdome, but also the Dougie Donnelly Members Lounge. So after the game, you can pop in there for a pint. You get all the benefits of the pitch side access to the Richie Vernon Thunderdome, but we'll also read your name out on the podcast as well. So the first person to pay £5, we've had our first already. So big shout out. Thank you very much, Ron Wilson, who's done just that. First person to be admitted to the Dougie Donnelly Lounge. He's on his own at the moment. Hopefully more people will join him soon. So he's got some company. We're in there, obviously, but
that means he's got he gets first pick at the bar. So.
But that's true. I was going to say we're in there, but we've got Sandy on the door, you taking money, I'm working the bar, so there's a bit of time to chat. We've got jobs to do as well.
Surely we should have Kevin Miller taking the money. He's the numbers guy.
I think Kev's the guy that checks the money at the end of the night against tickets.
All right.
He's a books man.
Make sure I'm not diddling stuff. Floor manager. I'll do floor manager.
Do floor manager. Just check everyone's all right on the night. Concierge. Just checking out. Check everyone's comfortable.
Sounds much classier. I'm taking that.
The podcast is going to remain free otherwise, and you can continue to listen and watch in the normal way, but for a small amount extra every month, that'll help us out massively. If you want to get in touch with us, we're on Twitter at Scott Rugby Blog, at Cammy Black, Facebook, as I've already said, we've got the blog, scottishrugbyblog.co.uk. We've got quite a bit of articles appearing on there over the next few weeks as we start to get towards some actual rugby happening. And if you want to email us, it's podcast@scottishrugbyblog.co.uk. Speaking of actual rugby happening, Ian, there has been an announcement this week. Well, not an announcement so much as a rumour that we are getting international rugby, but not the normal autumn test. We're getting a mini tournament.
The 6 to 8 Autumn Nations Test international friendlies thingamajig. Yes,
It's a catchy title.
It is. That I believe that's what we're going for.
The Thingamajig Cup.
The Thingamajig Cup. I think it's Thursday. I believe they're going to make a proper statement about it.
Yep.
So it's meant to be a split of 2 groups of 4. But how? Well, so are we going to do Scotland v Wales first, and then?
Well, apparently, there is a rumour that
Scotland
we're
and Wales
having
are in different groups. So
So aside, Scotland. It's strange. So Scotland in Scotland's group for this tournament. So there's 2 pools. We've got Scotland, France, Italy, and Japan. In the other pool, it's England, Ireland, Wales, and
Fiji.
So, but we are still playing Wales because we have to play Wales to finish the Six Nations.
Who are in Conference A, and then after that, there's a repechage.
And is it the top now? I think it's one play. Is it 1 plays 1 and 2 plays 2, 3 plays 3, 4 plays 4, and 5 plays 5? So there's like a final.
But you can't have 5 plays 5 because there's only 8
no
teams,
4 plays 4. You know what I mean? I went one too many.
You went too far. I stepped too far.
Yeah.
But
so there's like a playoff at the end to work who's really first.
So is Scotland Wales counted as a completely separate match?
It must be counted as a Six Nations match because it's. In fact, I think it's being played out with the 8 Nations tournament. I think, which is the provisional title for it. Because in October, Scotland have got a warm up against Georgia, allegedly at BT Murrayfield on the 24th.
Flying here again.
Then it's Wales v Scotland on the 31st of October. So those games presumably mirror the 2 outstanding Six Nations games that some other teams have to play. So presumably you finish Six Nations in October and then go straight into the 8 Nations tournament.
And that's not presuming that we don't get another lockdown.
Yes. So there's still lots of question marks over
obviously, this. Because the Wales game can't get played at the Millennium Stadium. Or the Principality Stadium, as it's now known, I believe.
Well, yeah, because
that's a hospital.
That's a hospital, yeah, and it's going to remain a hospital, I think, till after Christmas. So the rumor is that they're going to play theirs at Twickenham.
HQ,
indeed. Where Scotland are away to Italy, but home to France and Japan. The Georgia game then is a bit of a warm up, so I assume it means that Scotland then get 2 games. The same as everybody else going into the 8 Nations tournament, so everyone's warmed up. Still in the news if there's going to be crowds allowed.
No, and also there's still travel issues to be dealt with. I don't know. I know that I don't think Belarusian football stopped at any stage, and Georgia's nearish that area. I don't know what the situation in Georgia is, but obviously,
it's going to be hard it's going to be hard playing away to Italy and then everyone having to come back and have a 14-day quarantine because they've been to Italy and then play the final.
Aye,
you can't play final if you're in quarantine.
No. Yeah,
unless the other thing that they might do, which they've done with the England cricket and the West Indies, is if they get the governments to agree that so long as they're within their bubbles and don't go outside their hotels like they did with the Golf Masters, that they can waive the quarantine requirements, presumably.
And I think there's been the NBA. They've been trying to do that in America with the NBA, and I think even some people who didn't go out of their bubble, I think someone got a pizza delivered. They ended up with the coronavirus.
So I think it wasn't like half the Marlins baseball team came down with coronavirus as well, and they've been trying to do the same thing. I mean, it's not
And as you were saying with the cricket, Joffrey Archer, I think he broke some of the rules, and
He went to a mate's, stuffed at a mate's on the way up.
Yeah, Christ Almighty! It's like this is the first time you play your sport in months, guys. Just get 2 more days. Nah, but it's my mate Steve's birthday.
Pop round and check he's all right. Aside from this international tournament, which is all very exciting if it actually happens, we've got the Glasgow and Edinburgh finish to the Pro 14, which Glasgow can't get into the playoffs, can they?
No, I almost like it's all of the games. I think we've mentioned this before, but all of the games seem kind of pointless because the 4 qualifiers are pretty much all but guaranteed.
Yeah,
I mean, it would take Ulster to have some kind of massive meltdown, and Glasgow to like do something ridiculously good. I think to beat them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got presumably, if again, touchwood all being well and all going well, we get the Edinburgh Glasgow games back to back on Saturday the 22nd and Friday the 28th at both at Murrayfield. The second of those is Glasgow's home game in inverted commas. Then we have the Pro semi-finals, which will be on the weekend of the 5th of September, which will be of interest to Edinburgh fans, but not necessarily Glasgow fans. Although I'm sure you'll get behind. I'm sure you said, Ian, that you'd at the start of the season. Did you not say that you would like Edinburgh to make the final?
Yes, I said I would like Edinburgh to make the final, but not to win it, so that we can still claim bragging rights for being the only team to win it. But no, it's like I do support Edinburgh in Europe. I just don't want them to do better than Glasgow. I'm sure that most Edinburgh fans would say the same about like Glasgow.
It's fair enough, Ian. It's fair enough. I'm sure you're impartial when you're reporting on it. That's the main thing.
Yes, obviously. No, I don't think have I ever been allowed to do a Glasgow Edinburgh game.
I don't think so.
Wait, I think me and Sandy once, or one of you said to do like the reverse ratings. So I did Edinburgh ratings, and an Edinburgh fan did the Glasgow ratings. I don't know.
Maybe we should do that again. That's an idea for those 2 games.
And then
see how better things get then.
And then either way, we still get slated. I get slated for like rating Pyrgos too highly. Like I gave him a 4.5.
I don't think Henry Purvis has had more than a 4.5 on our match ratings.
I still think I gave him a 5.5, and then I get slagged off for. But he missed the last tackle. He was like, he was alright apart from that because he'd been pish for the rest of the season. That was his best game. But anyway, let's move on.
So we've got the Pro 14 final on Saturday the 12th. It's all crammed together with the Pro 14. Then after the Pro 14 final, the following weekend, it's European quarterfinals, which Edinburgh are away to Bordeaux Begles. Is it Beagles or Begles?
I just thought Bigley.
Bigley. Bordeaux Begles.
Bordeaux Begle? I don't know.
I think that's the LES is silent. Bordeaux Begs. So that's Edinburgh in the quarterfinals. Then the following weekend, it's the semi-finals. Now, the new Pro 14 season starts at the start of October, and this is where I think part of the concern comes, because this is a lot of rugby, particularly. I mean, not for Glasgow, let's be honest, Ian, but for Edinburgh potentially. Edinburgh players, this is a lot of rugby between the end of August. I know they haven't played much, but you're potentially going from this into a full season of rugby.
Well, let's even talk about it being almost an entire year of rugby. Seems to be a bit ridiculous. And also, by the way, just regards to Bigley, I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's just it's part of like Bordeaux. It's in the same area. Yeah. Obviously the readjustment of the season is troublesome, but and there's still, like we said on Thursday, there's still announcements being made by World Rugby, but they are also talking about completely changing the calendar. So I don't think we can take anything for granted, as to when Pro 14 is going to restart. Is it going to be an amalgamated season? Obviously, there's going to be travel restrictions. So, there's a potential for a lot of rugby to be played, but there's also potential for not a lot of rugby to be played.
No, it's very true, because of course where you then fit the new European season within those internationals, and then the going into a Six Nations in the spring, January in the spring, if you're able to play it, and then you're straight into a summer tour, Alliance tour, and it all feels very nothing feels certain at the minute. I don't think you can. I wouldn't. I would put money on some of these international games not going ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe. Well, hopefully not to the detriment of fans who've already paid their cash money, as has been the case quite a lot.
But there's been no announcements about this, and I know there's some fans are quite frustrated about this. That the lack of, I suppose, the lack of anything from the SRU about what's going to happen with season passes.
I think with the season, like as far as I know, season passes, like no direct debits have been taken. Usually by now, I would have had a Warriors season ticket. I think now would been round about my first payment. But it's more the people who paid money for the Wales game.
Yes.
And also, I mean, I don't know if that's the responsibility of the WRU to deal with that, or if fans have paid direct money to the SRU to then, as a sort of middleman almost. But those fans who bought those tickets for that match in March, we're talking 4 months ago, all people have been on a furlough, been on like reduced wages. They've already had their travel costs gone, so they deserve to know, are they getting that money back, or what's going to happen with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's talk of Twickenham having fans in it, but again, I think potentially that's the other thing in this. Potentially, you're going to have a different approach, and depending on where you are, potentially you might have fans in Twickenham, but no fans in Murrayfield because of the different approaches of the two governments.
Yeah, I think Twickenham, they're thinking because they're only saying 1 metre distancing, you can get 40,000 in.
But that's 1 metre. It's 1 metre distancing with mitigation. So that's 1 metre distance if everyone sits for an entire 80 minutes. Well, 80 minutes plus wearing masks.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people wanting end seats there. Murrayfield, 67.
How do you maintain a 1 metre distance when someone goes to the toilet? Do you all have to get up from your row and then just file out to let one person out to go to the toilet?
If that had actually happened in real life, that'd be lovely, wouldn't it? You wouldn't get other people splash back on you for all of us that have been stood at urinals at Murrayfield. Or anywhere, to be honest. Yeah, because we know that Donald Mackay and Peter Lawwell had both been trying to use BT Murrayfield and Celtic Park as bio bubbles because they wanted bums on seats to try and make some money. They were talking about 1,000 people in these 60,000, 65,000 seater plus stadiums. Just, it's like farting in the wind, isn't it? I mean, I don't really see the point until you can get enough people in it to make it some kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, unless it's either nothing or enough people to make it an atmosphere. You might get, I suppose, from a cash point, you might get hospitality booths might be an option just to get some cash in. Just quick shout out to Alan McDonald on Facebook, who's come up with the best pun ever, which is social pisstancing.
Oh, that's lovely. And also, man, I've just missed such a clear open shot at Edinburgh going, oh, you know what, maybe just, if there's 1,000 people there, that'd be a good turnout for Edinburgh usually, wouldn't it? John, that one's for you, buddy. Yeah, what's happened to Gene, the better half of Gene Anderhay?
Yeah, so, well, that's where it is. That's where we stand with it. There's an announcement coming. It looks like we're getting some rugby. Whether it goes ahead or not, we don't know. This is the long and the short of it. We're going to move on now. Now we've got something. We've got something quite exciting now, because people thought. I bet everybody thought, Ian, that just because we've gone to video, that we can't have the jingles. Well, do you know what? They were wrong, because we can have jingles. Of course, we can have jingles. We can have jingles with pictures. That's the great thing about this.
Why have we got Judge Judy on?
Well, you'll soon find out, because we've got a very special jingle coming up when I can make it work. This is the thing, I've got to practice this as well.
It's quite terrifying. I think she earns something like $40 million a year. That's like Michael Jordan money.
It's crazy what Judge Judy's on. She's a real judge. I think she's still, well, she was practicing at the time. As is Judge Rinder. He's a proper criminal barrister.
Yeah, he's also Benedict Cumberbatch's pal.
Is he?
Yeah, I think Benedict Cumberbatch might be like best man or something. He's winning.
Well, there you go. Well, here we go. This is the next jingle. As if you didn't think we could have them when we were on video, but here we go. We've got them with images too.
It's the legally mandated Lions chat. The legally mandated Lions chat. We've heard so much about it that it makes us sick, but we've still got to chat about who Gatlin's gonna pick.
There you go. It's the legally mandated Lions chat.
Oh, God. Oh. Hang on. Right, so we've got about a year of this to go already.
And it's already starting with the Lions chat. Well, only because I thought we needed to cover this. Only because there's two reasons why we're doing getting the legally mandated Lions chat out the way. Is because we've found out that the Lions tour to South Africa is going ahead, which is news item number one. Well, they've announced that it's going ahead. Whether it does or not, we don't know. That's the bottom line. We don't know whether it's going ahead or not.
Yeah, but
same disclaimers as with the previous chat. Whether or not South Africa is a place you want to go. The other bit of thing we've got is we've had an article on the blog written by Campbell, talking about some of the Scottish prospects for the Lions tour. And it's not, I mean, he's not that optimistic, Ian, at this stage in proceedings. And it's quite hard because we haven't had a lot of rugby. And we'll come on to Warren Gatland and his issues in a moment. But was there anything you picked up on in Campbell's piece that you disagreed with? You think he was largely fair?
I think one of the only one I would maybe have said no on is either McInally or Brown going. I don't think their arrows are good enough. I think Jamie George obviously is going to be like probably first pick. And the Sheriff, Ken Owens, he's an absolutely outstanding player. I mean, I don't know if it's maybe just a jumping issue, but Scotland's line out has not been operating great. Yeah. Brown's a wee bit of he gives away a penalty or two here and there. I mean, he obviously has many great qualities, as does Rambo, but are they going to be in serious consideration? But the only other main thing, like, if you look at our sort of nailed on ones, or the ones that you think would definitely go, Watson, Hogg, so much competition in those areas.
Yeah.
Is Watson that much better than Tipperick or Underhill and Curry? People seem to love them together. Tipperick's world class, and Gatland loves him. Obviously,
I think if we know anything about Gatland loves combinations, and I think the only way that Watson will make the touring party. But as you say, whether or not, I think the main aim for Scotland this year has to be get somebody in the test squad. And the only way that's happening is if we produce a world-class combination. Now, Hamish Watson and Jamie Ritchie have the potential, I think, to be a world-class combination at 6 and 7. Whether or not in this Hateful Eight tournament, that's what we call it, the Hateful Eight, we'll call it that, tournament that's coming in the autumn, they get a chance to show that against big opposition, because it's going to have to be France. They're going to have to stand up against France. Warren Gatland isn't going to see. I don't think he's going to treat games against Japan or Italy with any great reverence. We're not getting a chance to play away from home apart from against Wales, so they've got to show up against Wales. Whether or not they get a chance to play any rugby after that was the main thing. Warren Gatland's main issue with Scotland is they're poor away from home, and it's very difficult to argue with that.
The results show it, but there's such fine margins at this top level. I mean, Scotland played pretty bloody well against Ireland, Dublin. Probably should have won. Just weren't clinical enough. Didn't have that little cutting edge that maybe someone like Finn Russell could provide. So there's another man who we obviously have to sort of put in contention. Combo wise, I mean, I just think Richie is a guy who's born to play test matches. I think we've discussed this a few times. He's that great combination of what you want in a flanker, because he's that kind of like 6.5 kind of flanker. He plays with the number 6 on his jersey. He's played open side. He's big, he's athletic, he carries well. He's an absolute B-word, any B-word you want that's kind of rude at the breakdown. And he's just always right in your face. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And he's
exactly who you want to go and play in tests against the South African side.
Yeah, I mean, just remember that incident in the last Japan game when he was just, and also his reaction to getting punched in the face by Huas in the last game of rugby that I got to see. Just like, yeah, hit him in the bit with the metal plate is, so it's fine. This guy's just hard as bloody nails, and that's what, like you said, that's what you need in South Africa, because they're renowned for their physicality.
Yeah.
So you want to take him and just big hard lads.
I think that's why they work so well as a combo, because Hamish Watson. I mean, Jamie Richan, don't get me wrong, he's very physical in the loose, but Hamish Watson does his talking with those runs that he does, where he bounces off everybody, and both of them are absolute menace at the breakdown. But Jamie Ritchie's the one that gets in the faces of the opposition. We haven't had anybody like that who's been able to back that up with skill as well. We've had Ryan Wilson. We know what Ryan Wilson does. What Ryan Wilson does is wind people up very, very well. Yes, throws a cast line and hooks them in. We saw what happened in the 2018 Calcutta Cup game with Owen Farrell.
Many things with Ryan Wilson.
But Jamie Ritchie backs that up as well, I think, with skills, and that's what makes him intimidating. And I think there's a potential there for that combo. I think if it fires, I think the call for Stuart Hogg, I think Gatland said that if he'd not got injured by Conor Murray, he probably would have made one of the test squad. The high chance for going, Campbell's picked Rory Sutherland, which again, I think the problem of this isn't an issue with Rory Sutherland, it's an issue with Scottish props. Is we have Scottish props that come and explode onto the scene and have a really good season, and then they kind of fade, whether that's through lack of game, because they're lack of game time or injury. But I think Scotland really lack a consistent front row player. I think if you can back up what he did the Six Nations, then fair enough. But we've seen it before.
And my exact wording of my notes here is very much like Ryan Grant in 2012-13, come from nowhere, right straight into the trench. Lack of game time at club level is worrying, but he's coming in. He's been outstanding. Every pundit that's picked a Lions 15 on current form, like pretty much all of them, from Will Greenwood to O'Driscoll and Scottish ones. It's not just been Scottish bias. They've all picked Rory Sutherland, pretty much, and why not? The Scottish scrum where Peter de Villiers coming in has come on leaps and bounds.
It's de Villiers, isn't it, that's credited with Rory Sutherland, that he saw something in Rory Sutherland and said to Gregor Townsend he needs to be starting.
And this guy knows what he's talking about. So
I think the only thing Campbell's got Finn Russell at 50-50. I get his reasoning. The reasoning is, Finn Russell is out of favour with Gregor Townsend at time of Scotland last playing a game. They apparently the kissed and made up is the big story. Finn Russell did a big round of podcast interviews. Didn't come on ours, did he? It's because he's intimidated by the twirl or flake questioning, and that's the problem. Doesn't know how he's going to answer.
Well, all right, I'll alter it for him to Tang Fastics and Starmix. There we go.
It's 50-50. I mean, actually, I think if the relationship hadn't been repaired, it would be the greatest bit of trolling from Warren Gatland to have selected Finn Russell.
It would, but there's always a wild card in there. I mean, this is one that is, unfortunately, I think I do agree with Campbell on this. Finn Russell should go because, like, this thing, like, see if you're going to play Sexton, Farrell, or Biggar, right? Especially Biggar or Sexton, they're going to hoof it up a lot. And we saw the Wales South Africa game. Pollard is happy enough to do that. South Africa are happy enough to deal with hoofing. So you need somebody who's going to like inject a little bit of something special. I mean, even if you get Farrell outside, or like Manu Tuolangi, like I think if you had Russell with Tuolangi outside him, Tuolangi could hit a nice line. Russell could lure somebody in. Tuolangi can burst through.
I think that's the we did our 97 lines to a pod, and we were looking at some of the choices that Ian McGeechan and Jim Telfer made, and I think there's probably a lot of lessons to be learned from that tour if Gatland's willing to learn them. That he selected Townsend in that team because of the unpredictability. They decided not to play the South Africans at their game. They decided not. The forwards would take them on up front, but the backs were not going to play. The backs were not going to go and play physical rugby. They were going to go round them. They were going to go and do tricks and try and get over the top of them. They weren't going to, they weren't going to try and match them. And I think that's the way to go. That would be the way to, I think, I would struggle to see Dan Biggar going. But again, it's like I said, it's Gatland. That's the Gatland factor, and that's what you can't account for.
He likes Biggar because Biggar's also a good defensive organizer. And we know Gatland's good, big on defence.
Not recently, he's not.
Well, he's not got Sean Edwards with him anymore, is he?
Well, there you go. Sean's off eating baguette.
I wonder, is anyone is there a defence coach sorted for the Lions tour yet?
There's no coach has been announced yet.
Right,
there is. I think that there is. I think Townsend said that he would go this time. And the reason he didn't go, he was invited last time, didn't go because
just put his new slippers on.
Yeah, exactly. That's he didn't want to give it up for the new role. So I could see you could easily see. I think Townsend would probably accept a role this time if he's offered one. And Townsend's been to South Africa on a Lions tour before, of course. So he's quite well placed to do it. Yeah. So that'll be interesting. The coaching selection's not been announced yet, but that'll be interesting. It's quite interesting that they went with Gatland so early because actually, as things stand, it's not going well. It's not going well for Warren over in New Zealand at the moment with the Chiefs.
I think I don't have the full Sky Sports package. I've actually got the games on Saturday. They were on the free channel. I've recorded them, but not watched them. But yeah, things aren't going great, and it's not like I take great pleasure in it, but kind of take a little bit of schadenfreude, I suppose.
It's like he's away from his familiar territory, and things are hard, Warren, when you're playing away from home.
It's hard Warren ball.
Maybe that's the problem. Is trying to teach New Zealand players to do Warren ball is a thankless task.
Right, so teaching Welsh players how to play sort of New Zealand style, but then trying to teach New Zealand players a Welsh style is messing with them. Yeah,
he's gone back. I think it's just like saying what. So we get tackled and then we take contact and go to the ground.
Reverse the polarity of what made Wales good.
Don't cross the streams.
Oh God, he's crossed all the streams, all the seas and all the streams.
Outside bets then. Jamie Rich, we've already mentioned. Ali Price, I think that's fair for an outside bet. Although I think he could push his way in. I think he could again if he gets a good run of games. And Ali Price seems to have regained his form.
Yeah, I don't think that he if Conor Murray's standards have dropped a little bit, but Gatland's going to want to control a number 9, somebody who can box kick well. Murray fits that perfectly, and then there's Wales have got an abundance of good scrum halves. The fact they've brought Rhys Webb back into the fold. There's Gareth Davis, Thomas Williams, John Cooney's been an outstanding form for Ulster. Price, I like Price, but is he any better than Davis is a little bit of a pain in the hole. He's one of these guys. I've seen him do a number of dirty late tackles on try scorers, and I don't like him much. But he's good at what he does.
Yeah, I suppose the big question over all of these players is what kind of Scotland team are they going to be playing in the run up to the Lions? Because that's what did for them going into the last tour.
Well, it's just the fact that we can't string more than 2 good results together. if we could do that, then it would prove that yes, we can beat top class teams, and they can be better than their direct opponents.
And we can do it consistently as well, which is the main thing, because that's what we've struggled with is we can beat the big teams, but we can't beat them consistently. We can't beat them every week.
Yeah, and we can't beat them away from home.
Yeah.
Frequently.
The other name Campbell's thrown is an outside bet is Duhan van der Merwe, which is a good shout, I think, for an outside bet, because again, there's a couple of players that are going to come into reckoning for Scotland during the autumn. Ollie Kebble's coming in, isn't he? And we've got the Duhan. Is Jaco van der Volk?
I was about to say, if you don't
I haven't managed to do it. I will work on one. Don't worry, for the new season, I will have a Van der Volk interlude lined up. So Jaco van der Volk comes into the reckoning. I can't think of anybody else. Somebody will tell me who comes in. But Duhan's the big one, I think, from an attack point of view. That's the exciting one. Ollie Kebble, a little bit, I guess. Ollie Kebble. It's nice to have depth in the front row.
Yeah, and he's also one of these guys that, as we saw with the Warriors towards the end of the sort of chopped off season, Kebble can play either side of the scrum. I think he played at tight head for a bit. But Duhan's the exciting one. We just need to get him capped immediately before South Africa come in. Like, we'll try and lure him in.
Do you want to come back, son?
He's just an absolutely terrifying unit.
The other rumour, although I think this is it seems fairly concrete because it's been reported in a number of places, is that the Lions are going to play a home game at Murrayfield. If you can call it a home game, because if we're allowed crowds by that point, and depending on how many Scots Warren Gatland chooses in his squad, whether it's a home atmosphere or not, it will be interesting. They're going to play against Japan, is widely reported. Is what's been widely reported. So there's an incentive for Warren Gatland to select some Scots in the squad.
And an extended 68-man squad. I don't know if it's a great idea. I would have thought maybe it'd be a better call to play Australia or New Zealand, because there's probably more Australian or Kiwi expats who may be interested in going. I think you'd be lucky to get, even if we're allowed everyone in, you'd probably be lucky at 45,000.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I've got nothing against Japan, but I would have thought a Barbarians game would have been more interesting. Barbarians Lions game would be much more interesting.
Yeah, you get likes of get French players in, guys like Semi Ranrada. Yeah, so that'd be fantastic.
That'd be really good. I would have done that. I don't know what I don't really see. I mean, I know everybody's kind of talking about Japan. Scotland haven't got it easy in that pool for the Hateful Eight autumn tournament, but Japan, I think there's a lot of the World Cup bounce for them in the World Cup. It'll be interesting to see how well they do if that goes ahead in the autumn, because we've never really had problems with Japan other than that game.
That remarkable performance they put in. Yeah, apart from like Slippery Ball Fest, which sounds really dodgy, in 2016, because even the game at the World Cup in 2015, despite the fact they gave us a scare in the first half, then afterwards it was pretty one-sided. Then out came but they were knackered after playing South Africa.
I think that's the way any game of rugby tends to go. It's quite rare in most games of rugby. It's the second half when the better team pulls away. I think if you look at most New Zealand games, even against weaker opposition, it tends to be not close, but they don't tend to pull away until the second half.
Yeah, it's like they're viewing it as a chessboard, like where we're finding the weaknesses. Then they know where to go, and then they're like, right, inside run here, like. That's why New Zealand are so good, because they can operate quickly on the field. They don't need to be coached into anything. It's not all set plays. It's play as you see it.
Yeah. The other bit of news that there's been while we've been off is the Sevens Amalgamation. Now, it's covered on the blog. Kelly's written us an article on the blog that covers most of this in detail. But again, it's a rumor. There's nothing confirmed that they're going to amalgamate the women's sevens teams to create a Team GB. There was a rumour that was going to be the case with the men's team, but the SRU put out a statement saying there were no plans to do it with the men's team other than in preparation for the Olympics. where I think last time round, England were the qualifying team for the Olympics. And then I think they went and played some low-level sevens matches as Team G, like kind of this second-tier European sevens matches as warm-ups, essentially. We got, was it Scott Wright and Mark Bennett we got in the squad, I think, for the Olympics?
I think it was Scott White. Was it Scott White?
Scott Wright. I'm going to get that wrong. It's one of the two of them that runs the School of Sevens.
I thought it was Robertson. Was it not Mark Robertson?
Is it Mark Robertson? Well, there you go.
Bennett was definitely in. So I remember Bennett scored a brilliant try in the semi against New Zealand. He chipped it over a man's head. But Bennett was definitely in. But I don't think Scott.
Yeah, it's Mark Robertson.
Was it?
It's because Mark Robertson and Scott Wright do the School of Sevens in the Borders, where they do kind of summer camps for kids to learn sevens.
So because I got that right, that means that me and John definitely win the quiz from the virtual club.
Go on then. There's your extra point when the other team's not here.
They wouldn't have got that anyway.
So what's interesting about Kelly's article, I think, is that there's no. It removes a pathway for Scottish women to play competitive rugby at a higher level, because Lord knows that there isn't really many pathways within Scotland for playing higher level rugby, for women's rugby anyway. At the minute, there are pro players, and they're either contracted to one of the women's sides in the Premiership, or they are kind of contracted through teams based in England. So the sevens was kind of I think they just started to take it seriously in the last couple of seasons as a proper pathway. They were getting 15s players to go and play in the tournaments, and they were having some luck. I think they were trying to get promotion into the proper top tier as well. So it's, you look at what the men's sevens has done for the men's game, and it's a shame that the same can't happen with the women's as well. From a financial point of view, I can kind of see it, but I think at the same time, it's a shame not to take a longer world view of it.
Yeah, I think, well, considering recent events and the SRU have basically said there's going to be redundancies made. It seems like it's one of these things that's sort of closest to the chopping block.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could have had a statement about it. I think that would have helped with that. Either to say we're in discussions, or this is going to be a short-term thing while there's a realignment of finances or something, or it's going to be for a couple of seasons, or at least to say there's discussions about it rather than the men's team safe. And then I haven't seen anything to confirm or deny the rumours around the women's team. We've got the RFU talking about temporarily basically making all their sevens players redundant.
Yep.
Because they can't afford to keep them on.
Yeah, I think I think before the last sort of Olympic cycle, they'd made the 15s team redundant just to put money in sevens, and then they'd reverse that. So again, it seems very unfair on the players, who many of them are young people who've this is their goal, this is their aim in life, and this is their pathway, and then all of a sudden it's just gone.
Yeah. And like I said, there's not many pathways for Scottish women rugby players at the minute.
No, it's a limited league structure, and then
no, and there's nothing that mirrors the Pro 14, or that Ireland have got successful women's teams. They've got a very good international setup. That it kind of feels that Scotland needs a women's pro team, but where that comes from and who they end up playing against, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's a London Scottish equivalent.
No. I think Loughborough Lightning are probably the equivalent at the minute. I think they've got quite a fair healthy.
Like such as Ronan Lloyd.
Ronan Lloyd from the big club dinner, of course. In other Scots abroad news, Harlequins have signed under-20s prop Mac Wilson. And I mentioned that especially because he's come through at Duns and Berwick for playing for Melrose. There's a really interesting article on him on the offside line that's worth checking out. He's had a lot of injuries, but he's always seems to have bounced back from them. So to make it to Harlequins, he kind of was part of the Borders in the East Lothian Academy. He was on the books at Southern Knights, but only got many games because of injury, and now he's signed for Harlequins, which is, I think, testament to how he's bounced back from those injuries. He's also studying to be an astrophysicist. So following, I think as it was pointed on the offside line, following a line of very intelligent props after Ewan Murray, who's a vet, and his lordship Girth, who is of course a doctor, a qualified GP.
I'm actually talking of Scots going abroad. The sort of mental health awareness article I did with Dan Tominick of Stirling County. Yeah, he's got Polish family, and he is going to be joining Budolany Lublin back in Poland.
Fantastic.
So good luck to him. Yeah.
Good luck to him.
His first contract there.
That's great.
He'll be going off to Poland.
We've said that before, and it's probably something we need to do on the blog at some point. Is people, play. We hear expats. We hear about a lot. We always hear about the people that come over to Scotland to play, but we don't hear many stories about those that go abroad and take the game overseas. As Mark Camburn is doing good work in Bolivia.
Yeah, I was thinking with the I think the pair of brothers went over to Argentina or Chile and
did something similar.
Yeah, way back in the day, and I think they're in the Rugby Hall of Fame. It's going to annoy me. I'm going to have to look up. Move on to the next.
Move on to the next thing. The next thing is Glasgow and Edinburgh squad depth. Now, Sandy's done an article, and Edinburgh and reasonable nick. They're a bit light at 10 maybe, and possibly 15. But I think Darcy Graham's deputised there in the past, and it's not. They've got enough options to shift people around. Glasgow, though, and I know we're going to get accused of Glasgow bias by not talking about Edinburgh, but to be honest, what's your problem? Check your privilege, Edinburgh fans, because you're all right. Glasgow, the cupboard is bare. Danny Wilson said signing news was imminent on the 1st of July, and since then, there has been nothing. Well, I think Hamish Bain came out, but I think he was part of the same news conference that said...
Yeah, it was actually 3. I looked this up.
3 days.
It was 3 weeks to the day that it's like there's going to be a host of new announcements. No, it was 3 weeks. Hamish Bain gets signed. Actually, yeah, it's here as my notes. I don't particularly think, and this is not just me trying to ask us up to Edinburgh fans. I don't particularly think they're in. It's not the squad depth as such. It's in the areas of strength. Like Edinburgh's got so many good back rows. Bradbury, Ritchie, Crosby, Mata, Haining.
So much so that Sandy forgot to put Magnus Bradbury in his number 8 squad depth article.
And he's a Fijian lad. I can't remember his name now. But yeah, I've seen him playing for Super 6, and he's a decent enough player. Front row again, lots of strength. Locks after Tullis and Gilchrist, McKenzie.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, that's it. You're saying. I think you're right. I think second row is not that. I think it's Callum Hunt-Hill has stayed with Saracens.
Yes, yep.
Scrum half isn't great.
No. Purgos Groom's still there, isn't he?
Nick Groom and Henry Purgos and Charlie Shield.
Yeah. See, now, this is one thing I would be prepared, seeing as, right, I'll put this forward to the SRU, and this is straight to Richard Cockrell, right? Geese want a Doohan or Darcy Graham, and you can have Ali Price. I think I prefer Doohan. Yeah, I'll take Doohan. But But like Darcy's a consolation prize. No, I'll take either of them. Maybe even a King.
You can have Ali Price.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the deal.
They do need a better scrum half. They do better scrum half options. I think there's that. Standoff, again, what's interesting at standoff is obviously the transfer for John O'Lance didn't go through because you can get a work permit. Simon Hickey signed for the Hurricanes this week.
I know.
Sandy says he's going to stop. I said, what will happen? Can you just imagine all the bants when he becomes an All Black? And Sandy has promised that he'll stop writing for the blog if that ever happens. So we've
Win
got
a drop goal at the next World Cup final.
So there's Jaco
Stephen Donald it.
Jaco van der Vault, and that's it. Nathan Chamberlain's come in from the academy with Bristol Bears. It's Scotland under 21 10. And then it's down to the academy recruits Centre seem fairly healthy, but like I said,
Blair Kinghorn.
maybe. I think Richard Cockrell says no. It's essentially what's happened there. Richard Cockrell said no, he's not playing 10.
And that's it.
So, but Glasgow then, it's light. You got Adam Hastings, and then you're dropping down to
Brandon Thompson, Pete Horn, George, I suppose, Hornito could at the biggest push.
Imagine.
Well, I did see as well. I saw Nick Frisbee made his debut for Western Force at the weekend.
Where did he go on his knees?
Probably at some stage. Yes, a bit limited. Centres stacked to the rafters.
As always.
Johnson, Pete Horn, McDowell, even Paddy Kelly, Nick Gregg, Hugh Jones, Kyle Stain.
Yeah.
Fullback, bit of an issue.
Tommy Seymour. I've looked at Kevin Miller on Top of the Moon's depth chart. This is done in June, to be fair, but fullback, Tommy Seymour, and that's it.
Yeah, and Tommy Seymour's in a sort of light, a sort of darker blue colours, and that's not his natural position.
Yes.
Aye.
So, yeah, it's not great. And even on the wings, you kind of could do with an extra because you've got Nico Matawalu, who can obviously cover at scrum half as well. Ratu Takiv, Robbie Nairn, Kyle Stain, and Lee Jones.
Yeah, that's basically enough.
And again, even at lock, you've got Richie Gray, Scott Cummings, Andrew Davison, and then Kieran McDonald signed, hasn't he? So that
Andrew Davison went to Edinburgh.
Of course he did.
We've got Hamish Bain, Carrie McDonald, Richie Gray, and
Scott Cummings,
and Leone,
and of course Leone,
and Rob Harley a push. But then that means there's a shot in the back.
Did you see the footage of all the Glasgow players returning to training at Scotstoun today?
I did not actually know.
You can tell who's as soon as they're able has rushed down the barber to get a trim. Rob Harley, to his absolute credit, has not even attempted to cut his own hair during lockdown. It was a full ginger bush,
mane.
Absolutely magnificent.
Lovely. They look like an angry lion.
It did. It looked exactly like an angry ginger lion. So yeah, there's a pause on recruitment. Apparently, there are signings imminent. We keep getting told, but when and where and whom we do not know.
People always to come over and actually sign contracts.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's all it is. Well, they managed to sign Leone, and he's still building a house in Fiji, isn't he?
But he just stretched out his big periscope arm
and reached all the way across.
Offloaded his signature.
He's got there's got all these random boys working on Ryan Wilson's house on his Instagram every second day. Maybe some of them can play rugby.
Who knows?
Well,
that's a new academy. That's a new Scotstoun Academy.
Well, that's what I remember. Al Kellogg once posted a video of he got all the guys around for a barbecue, but mainly so they could move his shed from one side of his garden to the other. So I like to say that's what Ryan Wilson's doing with all the academy kids. He said, "Come around mine and I'll talk to you about rugby," and then it's just getting them to work on his house.
Also, my car needs cleaning. He's sort of wax on, wax off.
The next bit of news. We'll move on to the next bit of news from the world of rugby. Should we do the World Rugby proposal on trans players?
If we must.
I'm not. It's not because I don't want to talk about it. It's because I don't want to have to shut off the comments on the blog after we've put this podcast up. Right. Here's what's happened in this week. There has been a leaked World Rugby report that's come out of a symposium earlier this year where lots of people got together and had a chat about what we're going to do about trans women playing rugby, because apparently there was some concern. Now, from reading the PowerPoint slides from the symposium, which I did, that concern, as far as I understand, has not come from within rugby. It has come from pressure groups outside of rugby asking the question of rugby, what are you going to do about trans women in rugby? So as far as I can tell, nobody in rugby necessarily has an issue with trans women playing women's rugby. But as people may be aware, there is a wider debate going on in the world about trans women and women's rights and how they fit together. We're talking about this in terms of rugby tonight. We're not going to get involved in the wider debate. It's a very sensitive and complex issue, and I'll say that at the start. The response to this proposal to ban trans players, women, from playing women's rugby has been troubling, I think. There's a lot of people have used it as a way to be fairly openly transphobic. And the main thing to come out of the symposium, although there's been no announcement from World Rugby yet, in fact, there's been nothing but silence, which again hasn't particularly helped things. I think a holding statement to say this was only a consultation, it was only a discussion, we haven't made any decisions, something like that might have been helpful, but that hasn't happened. So we don't know what their actual thinking at the minute is. I understand there are ongoing discussions. What those discussions are, we don't know. But this is out there now. People are having arguments about it, so we need to touch on it. Like I said, I think when we talked about the Exeter Chiefs thing, rugby does not exist in a vacuum. These discussions from the wider world do come into things and do seep into rugby, and we need to address them. So the main concern seems to be the World Rugby are essentially looking at this from a safety point of view. And Tim O'Connor, who some of you may know from Twitter, who's a barrister that specialises in sports law, mainly rugby, did a whole presentation on litigation in sport, not on trans women playing sport, but on litigation in sport in general. And it seems to be that the current protocol that World Rugby are adopting, which is based on the IOC protocol, might be flawed. We don't know how, but it might be flawed. So the main arguments are that there are physical differences between people born male and people born female that cannot be removed even after treatment. It's worth thinking about the current rules then, because it's not just the case, as some have suggested, that you can walk into a women's rugby club and say, I am, as a man, and say, I am now a woman, I want to play rugby. It doesn't work like that. Essentially, you have to follow the IOC guidelines that you lower your testosterone levels for at least 12 months. So you then, for the SRU to play women's rugby as a trans woman in Scotland, you have to go through a whole process which involves lowering your testosterone levels for 12 months, then going to a panel and applying to the panel, signing that you are living as a woman, and getting the chief medical officer and the panel to approve you to be able to play. So there are safeguards in place to cover the eventuality of a man saying, I am now a woman, I'm just going to play rugby. That doesn't happen. The scientific studies in this PowerPoint focus on the differences between male and females, even after medical treatment and surgical procedures that people might go through to transition. But all the sports that they talk about are not related to rugby. They tend to be individual sports. They're not related to rugby. And there's only kind of the one anecdote that everybody talks about, which is that BBC article, which we touched on in a previous podcast, and I had to close the comments down that time, which was the trans woman playing women's rugby in Wales, where the coach made an unfortunate comment, which was when she tackled one girl and she folded like a deck chair. And he followed it up with, I think, something along the lines of, but all the girls love her and love having her on the team. We've never had an issue with playing other teams, etc., etc. It wasn't seen as an issue. It was an off-the-cuff remark, but that has come back to bite World Rugby on the bottom a little bit. My concern would be that the size difference in rugby isn't unique to women's rugby or trans women playing rugby. It's something that happens in men's rugby. I mean, you look at, what's the most watched clip in rugby is Jonah Lomu running over Mike Catt. You look at Darcy Graham.
Not only Mike Catt, it was like a good few people.
He looks at the entire England squad and the Underwoods as well. You got that. Look at two players in Edinburgh that play in the same position wing. Darcy Graham and Duhan van der Merwe. Darcy Graham, he's tiny. Darcy Graham's tiny, a tiny man. But you look at what he does around the park. Well, that hit that Christine put on Matt Bastiro during the Toulon Edinburgh game. Do you know what I mean? Christine and Matt, that is not a matchup. So I think I think it's a symposium, but I think the mistake from World Rugby would be to look at to see what other sport, physical differences and the impact that has in other sports, because I don't think that relates to rugby. And I know there are other issues as well, but if you're just doing it on size, then I think you're going to have to do it for men's rugby. You might as well do it for men's rugby as well, if that's how worried you are about safety.
Yeah, you're going to start. Well, we know that in New Zealand, for example, the weight class rugby rather than age grade it. in younger years, but we're going to start doing that like at international level. We're going to have the
Heavyweight rugby,
welterweight champions of the world, get Bruce Buffer out every week. No, I mean, like, obviously, we're no.
Well, we're two white men, Ian, talking about this.
We're two white cisgender heterosexual males talking about something, and we don't really know what it's like to be a transgender human being. I think I only have like one transgender friend. I think that's, I've encountered a few, but I think there's only one that I could genuinely say that I speak to on a sort of semi-regular basis, even sort of virtually. Yeah, I mean, it's like, are you going to say that Usain Bolt's wasn't allowed to run because he was taller than everyone else? Where does it stop? You've got Caster Semenya, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think the technical term is that she's hyperandrogynous. Like, so she just naturally produces a lot of testosterone. That's not her fault. You can't sort of, I mean, I don't know what the sort of alternative term is, but it'd be like chemically castrating her to sort of like, no, you've got too much testosterone. We need to bring you down to this level. Or, are you going to try and regulate all testosterone levels? I mean, obviously you don't want people cheating and taking drugs, but if it's something that's actually occurring in a human being's body, how can you,
and I think that's the other thing that
regulate it.
I was reading a couple of articles about this, because again, when this first kind of appeared in Twitter, when it wasn't related to rugby, I was all at sea with this. It's been an education. I think we're all kind of going through that process at the minute. And one of the things that came up in one of the articles I was reading is, what message does this send to women about body image as well? Saying you're weaker than men. And there might be a biological background to that, but it also says that women cannot be large. Women cannot be of a big build. Women cannot be tall. The women have to be small and petite and thingy, and 20 or 30% weaker than men, as this one of the studies put forward. It doesn't say to women it's okay to be all shapes and different sizes. And I think it does a massive disservice to body image. And rugby has there have been women professional rugby players talking openly about the difficulties they have had with body image when they've started properly bulking up and training as a rugby player. So to suddenly turn around to them and almost perpetuate this myth as strong women look like men, essentially that, you're a man if you're a strong woman or you're built with muscles. It's a massively dangerous thing to start saying. And that's the kind of impression I think some of these things give, is that if you're a tall, large built woman, that somehow then you've got a physical advantage over other women and you can't play. And that's, like you said, then we're getting into the world of weight classes, and do we do that across all rugby? And there's equality laws as well to protect people with who've gone through gender reassignment. And that's not the full kit and caboodle, full work surgery. That's people who just take medication.
I think as well, it seems to us kind of like scaremongering, as in sort of like every single trans player will be someone who is much bigger and much stronger. Like, it will be some like massive hulking Billy Vunipola type on steroids in comparison, whereas the majority of the one, you get these once in a sort of, well, not once a lifetime, but once out of every 50 people who are massive. I mean, like, you take example Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right? Compared to me and you, that man is a man mountain.
Yeah.
But then I've seen him stand beside a basketball player who's 7'2", and he looks like a child compared to a very muscular child. But it's just, people are different shapes and sizes. And if there was an entire team of, and the high unlikelihood that this happened, that trans women who used to be all powerlifting men, who then became rugby players, then you'd maybe be a bit worried, because they'd all be absolutely huge and like could possibly slam everyone at the ground. But that's not going to happen. That's, it seems to be fear mongering, on the basis of, like I said, like that one person is going to be that much more destructive than the rest.
And it's a tiny, we're talking about a tiny minority in society. And I think that's it. And then they're a very marginalised minority as well.
I'm not just talking about rugby players here.
No, very tiny minority of people but no, it's not. It's we talk. I think it's something like 0.3 to 0.5% of the population. So you're not talking about professional, international level. You're talking about people going down the community rugby club and playing rugby. And as I said, it's not. As some people have said, it's what stopping a man from going and playing women's rugby and becoming successful at it. Well, what 12 months of lowering your testosterone levels, and that's no read up on it. That's not something you would willingly choose to do unless you really want to do it, because it's going to cause some pretty irreversible effects on your body. So you're not going to go, I'm going to do this for a laugh for 12 months just so I can play women's rugby. I know the commitment that Lance Armstrong had to cheating, but that's some level of commitment to completely change your body.
Morgan Spurlock extreme there.
So if I'm honest, I don't know what the solution is. I know the solution isn't excluding people from what is supposed to be one of the most inclusive sports in the world and turning around to people and saying, sorry, you just can't play. There needs to be a solution to it. I know it's a difficult issue because I know then you start to get into other issues about sharing changing facilities and all of those sorts of things. It hasn't been handled particularly sensitively. And I don't think everybody's shouting at each other and accusing anybody who kind of sides with trans rights as, hating women, and everybody who sides with women as hating trans women. I don't think that's particularly helpful, but that's the climate in which the discussion is being had. And, I can understand World Rugby wanting to get a specific protocol in place for rugby, but it needs to be inclusive. This is the bottom line. So, yes, that's where we are with it. It's okay just to sit back and listen. You don't have to align yourself to one side. You can just sit back and listen. You don't have to take a side.
You can be on do not know, undecided.
That's fine. And I think there is a lot of do not know in this. There is a lot of questions that need to be answered. So we shall wait and see. But yes, it's something that's coming, and there's going to be a lot of debate about this, and we'll probably talk about this again in future. Hopefully, with someone much better placed to discuss it than you or I. And yes,
I won't do the 12-month program as you suggested.
You're not going to do that just to go and.
I'm full Donald McIntyre here. Just like that's it. I'm going to. I don't know what position I'm going to play.
Anyway, we're going to move on quickly. Let's do. Yes. I've got another jingle. Here we go. Hang on, that didn't work. It didn't play from the start, and it's the wrong jingle. That didn't work, Ian. Here we go. Here's the proper jingle.
Well, we're looked high and we're looked low, seen doggy bop on in the speedos, but I just want to know, did you see the legend that's Dougie Donnelly?
Yes, it's Where's Dougie Donnelly. What did you think of that?
I adored it. It was. I love the Where's Wally, Where's Dougie.
The cutaway, I know. Yes, so it's Where's Dougie Donnelly. We haven't actually got any Where's Dougie Donnellys this week, but I'd spent a good hour making that jingle intro, and I wanted to play it.
Do you know where he was?
So,
do you know where he was? He was last Friday. He was on your Facebook.
He was
at the virtual club dinner.
If you want to find Dougie Donnelly, go to our YouTube page, watch his speech. It is utterly amazing. It is gold. It is on it. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll hurl. It's wonderful stuff. There is a joke.
What, 16 minutes?
16 minutes. There is a joke to which the punchline is balls hitting the mattress, and honestly, that slayed me. It got me twice. It got me when I recorded it with him, and then it got me again on the night.
I mean, that's the thing about great comedy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to like reference a Dave Chappelle thing, but the punchline is a bit rude, so best not. No, we can put that. We can put that on the Patreon one. We could do. This is the sort of thing. We're on Patreon. Maybe we'll. Oh, Ron Wilson. Oh, Ron Wilson said I saw him last Friday, but of course, Ron, you would have seen him on the. You saw him on the club dinner? A couple of shouts on. We'll just pick up on a couple of things. Thank you for everyone joining on Facebook. People may be joining in elsewhere, but I'm only able to keep. We've only got 2 of us on this evening, so we can't be on tracking whether anyone's commenting on Twitch or YouTube. But on Facebook,
Liam Burns said there's a big body differential between Fatima Whitbread and Teta Sanderson, both throwing javelin at international level, both being champions in their field. I think that's an excellent point. Alan McDonald said a really measured take on a difficult and nuanced issue. So thank you for that, Alan. And then Ron Wilson just jumping in and saying he saw Dougie Donnelly last Friday on the podcast. So there we go. That's Where's Dougie Donnelly. If you do see anybody out and about related tangentially to Scottish rugby or not, just let us know. We're always happy to read that out on the podcast. We did a shout out on Twitter for this. I've not been on Twitter that much because there is, of course, there's a boycott of Twitter at the minute because they didn't ban Wiley for tweeting some anti-Semitic stuff. So I had to pop on to tell everyone we're doing the podcast, otherwise no one would be listening. But apart from that, I've been staying off. So I think that's where most people have been this week is boycotting Twitter. So we've not got any. We normally get a couple of Where's Dougie Donnelly, and we haven't had any. Also, everyone's in lockdown, so everyone's staying at home.
Which so means they'd be on our phone more often.
Exactly.
But I didn't know about this Wiley blackout thing.
Well, there you go.
I'd read about what he wrote and was like, Jesus, that's one way to kill your career, son. And also, you're a horrifying person.
I know. It was quite a shock when I saw as well. We'll move on and we'll do our last thing now. And you'll be surprised to know, Ian, I've also got a jingle for this. So let's go. Here's our last jingle of the night. Let's see if I can get this to work. It's all queued up. Here it is. Yes, it's hands in the ruck, and there's Scotland getting their hands all over England's ruck.
It was Maro Itoje. He had his hands in the ruck.
He has his hands in the ruck. Is that
the second time? Yeah.
good spot there, Ian. Maybe I should try. If I could try and find different gifts every time of people having hands in the ruck, we could just do name that hands in the ruck.
Well,
we haven't had any shouts from the from Twitter or elsewhere for hands in the ruck this week. Do you want to go with yours first, Ian? I think mine probably reads on from yours nicely anyway.
Yeah, so as you might remember from the virtual club dinner, we did our little introductions, and mine was a sort of, he's going to be a yappy little sort of South African scrum half, and I kind of toned it down because I was going to make light of something which really pissed me off, but it's more goddamned racism, because on Rugby Pass, the last two Rugby Pass articles I've seen. The first one about Saya Khaleesi, and then one about Matawira. How did you pronounce it? Matawira, the Beast, who've voiced their support for Black Lives Matter and stuff. And it's just been slammed. Every comment has basically just been white dudes called Willem de Soutenoux, just saying all lives matter and just slating them as human beings rather than rugby players. And it's just, the outweighing of sort of positive to negative messages is very high on the negative. So I'd kind of blocked myself from sort of pastiching it or trying to satirise it last week. Satirising makes it sound fancy when it was. But yeah. It was really, really upsetting to read these things, and especially when you get so many rugby fans giving it it's an inclusive game, as you were just, as we've been talking about.
Well, it's interesting to say that. One of the things, this isn't my hands in the ruck, I've got something else for it. We're going to talk about it now anyway, but there was an article in the Times with the name's gone now. There's an article in the Times anyway with Panache Muzambe, who's plays for the Scotland women. She's plays in front row, talking about Black Lives Matters and talking about being coming to this country from Nigeria and of the discrimination she faced in Scotland
Zimbabwe.
And the racism. Zimbabwe, was it?
I think she's Zimbabwe. I've got it here.
Have you got the Times article? Mark Palmer.
Yeah, Zimbabwe. Yep.
Zimbabwe. Well,
with Edinburgh as a young teenager. Yeah, because I'd made one of the Scotland women's games I covered. She was she came on off the bench.
Yeah. So a very exciting prospect for Scotland. But she talked a lot in that about being a role model for black women in rugby and black women in Scottish rugby, and how she's a very inspirational woman. She's been a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament. Spoke very passionately about asking her teammates at club level and at national level to take the knee the next time that they play, which I think would be a very powerful statement. And when I suddenly thought, and I think we've probably touched on this in the past, is, what are Scottish rugby doing about diversity in rugby in Scotland? Because as far as I can tell, and I might have missed this, and I'll be honest, I'm going to hold my hands up. If I'm wrong about this, I apologise to anybody, but I haven't seen any messages from Scottish rugby about Black Lives Matter. I haven't seen anything on that. I couldn't see anything on. There's been nothing on Twitter. There's been nothing public to say that they stand with that sentiment of Black Lives Matter. That's important in Scottish rugby. But there is no diversity policy that I could find on the SRU website. There's a disability policy. Couldn't find a diversity policy about how you increase diversity in Scottish rugby. We've had Luke Crosby talk about how, even from a socioeconomic point of view, it's hard to break into. Was it Luke Crosby or Lewis Carmichael? I get them mixed up. They've got LC in his initials. Ian's shrugging at me now. That's for the benefit of our audio listeners. Ian's shrugging.
That's an Edinburgh question. I don't know.
The one from Falkirk. But they're talking about, from a socioeconomic point of view, as a lad from Falkirk, it was hard to break into the professional rugby ranks because he wasn't from a school and he wasn't based in Edinburgh. And that's the truth. That's the truth in Scottish rugby at the minute. If you are not based in Edinburgh and if you are not part of the school system, it is hard to break into professional rugby in Scotland. So if it's hard for a white man from a socioeconomically deprived background to break into professional rugby, how is it then for black and ethnic minority people who might be interested in the sport of rugby to get a game? And the answer is, well, there's nothing, there's no efforts being made, as far as I can tell, to try and widen the appeal of rugby in Scotland. I think it's being played in schools more as a sport. I think it's on the national curriculum now more than it has been in the past. So there's one way. But what are the SRU actively doing to try and engage minority communities to come into Scotland? We had the first thing when the club dinner. We said Scotland had the first non-white international player in the first international game ever played in Alfred Clooney's Ross. I've seen nothing about that during the Black Lives Matters thing, and that would be something to flag up. Induct him in the Hall of Fame, celebrate that happened. I think at the time he was an educated guy, so probably at the time they saw him as the right sort of ethnic minority at the time, and when he played, but still, it should be celebrated. But instead,
Absolutely.
silence. And nothing is said.
Yeah,
so,
especially when we've seen, slave master statues dragged off of plinths and thrown into the sea. In Glasgow, we're talking about changing some street names because they were owned and named after some, frankly, reprehensible people. And I don't like anyone giving it no, it's part of the history. That's just what happened back then. We're talking about absolute savagery. We're talking about people treating lives just like bits of paper.
Yeah,
it's all about money, and some absolutely horrifying things happening. I've seen stuff about Belgium and I can't remember. It was some Belgian tobacconist used to cut limbs off. Stuff like absolutely horrifying stuff. So we should not be celebrating this. This should not be a thing in history. That's like your All Lives Matter crowd. That's like going to a Holocaust memorial and just going, it wasn't just the Jews who got killed, though, was it? In World War II, it's the All Lives Matter thing. We know that all lives matter, but it's not focused on that. We're talking about institutionalized racism. So can you just can it for a minute? Let's get back on point, and then everything will be fine.
I found an article. I googled Scottish rugby diversity, and I wonder what is Scottish rugby's policy on diversity in rugby. So I googled Scottish rugby diversity, and there was an article which, and this is no word of a lie, it's Scotland. I'm going to get this right. Scotland.org. So this is an official Scottish government website, as I understand it. And obviously, they're trying to promote Scotland as somewhere for people to come and to live their lives, and what a great, diverse country it is. And the headline is Scotland is a field of dreams for careers and lifestyles. And then the subheading says Scotland's rugby team is a shining example of diversity, galvanizing a top team of players from all over the world who love living and working here. So some of the
mainly
players,
Edinburgh.
yeah, but here we go. So the players highlighted are Nick Grigg, Sam Johnson, Tim Visser. And I'll tell you something that's all the same about those players, Ian, is they're all white. So it's not entirely diverse. I mean, to be fair, the article does mention Daryl Marfo, but
and two of them, their first language is English.
well, exactly.
As well, so.
It's hardly, it's that thing of,
It's not exactly a melting pot. It's not New York, is it?
No, Scottish Rugby essentially have decided rather than invest in diversity programs and widen the scope of rugby in Scotland, what we're going to do is give Sean Linnane a massive expense account to go around and find people with Scottish grandmothers playing in the Mitre 10.
But Nick Rigg was found off a YouTube video, I believe, a
Was he?
YouTube highlights package. So it's just like, so I was sitting there like, it's rugby highlights. Who's this wee guy? Yeah.
It seems all right. Phone him up if you've got a Scottish granny.
That's-
Probably Google someone in the Scottish Rugby head office Googling Mitre 10 players.
What's his name now? Welsh scout. I don't know if he still does it. He was like head of player recruitment at the SRU. Welsh, had a proper Welsh name, and that's how he found Hugh Jones. Was
Yes, he did.
he
Yeah,
was
he's
staying
found
up
off the
watching
highlights.
Rugby Pass. Yeah, he's watching like Stellenbosch University. And it's like it has a Scotland flag beside it. He was like, what?
It's so it's not. I think we've said before, and we've talked about how Mark Dodson's comment, I think that came out during the Keith Russell tribunal about not wanting to, people don't play rugby in the West End of Glasgow,
East.
East End of Glasgow.
They do in the West.
There you go. So it's just Glasgow. But still, people not playing rugby there, and so why bother? That's the wrong attitude to me. We should be trying. Rugby's about. We've said already. Rugby's about inclusivity. It's about trying to get more people to play the game and broadening the appeal of that. And you don't do that by excluding people. And maybe there is. It's not a conscious thing, but I think there probably is an unconscious bias in Scottish rugby that favours people from a certain socioeconomic background and people of a certain colour.
Well, that's why Gary Graham was going to pick England, because he was considered. Well, he thought he'd been one of the best performers at the Under-20s World Cup for Scotland, but then just because he felt like he wasn't part of the right clique, he wasn't selected. And so when England came calling, he was like, "All right, fine, screw yous." And
I think you can't ignore. You've got to listen to him. That was his experience. You've got to listen to what he had to say, that's how he felt, and what was it about the climate in the under-20s at the time that made him feel like that, and why wasn't Gary Graham picked up? Why did he have to go down and play there over some of the other lads? Because he wasn't in a school. He was living in a council house in Carlisle.
I mean, the thing is, right, if you're like going to be good enough to be picked for England, you're probably going to be good enough to be picked for Scotland, aren't you?
Yeah.
Let's be honest here.
Yeah, so that's it. So yes, I think more needs to be done in Scottish rugby to increase diversity, because the Scottish international team as it is, I would argue, does not represent Scotland as a nation.
No. I'm trying to think. The only player of at least mixed race that I can think of during my lifetime is probably Joe Hansbrough.
Yep.
Obviously there's a few sort of maybe Kiwi Maori descent, but other than that, all big white dudes.
I think anybody that pulls on the Scottish shirt is Scottish. We've said that before, but I think there is something about where not identifying these players, that potential players that are already in Scotland, because we're a small nation of small population. We've got a small player pool. If you're going to widen that pool, you need to widen it out, beyond white, upper class, middle white people.
I mean, you have to cast a wide net to catch good fish.
Exactly. My hand's in the ruck because we've gone on, Ian. We're an hour and a half in. I thought we were going to do a solid. I was going to do a tight hour tonight. I didn't have much to talk about.
It's my fault again. I'm sorry.
We've waffled on. My hands in the ruck is World Rugby taking on the Pacific Players Welfare Association. So the Pacific Players Welfare Association is an independent players association that represents players with Pacific heritage. They're self-funded. They get sponsorship. They've got Patreon, which you can go and contribute to. They don't get any funding from World Rugby. Their aim is to help players with cultural transitioning, helping with contracts, agents, and life after rugby. They do a lot of work with the Pacific players in Scotland. They get Ben Antigua's a member of the association. And they released a 59-page report on World Rugby's governance and its failures to deal with allegations against Francis Keane, who is the Fijian rugby chairman. Now, for those that don't know, Francis Keane is not a nice man. He was in charge of Fiji's prison service. I think he might still be. He's also brother-in-law of the Fijian Prime Minister, Frank Bainimarama. Keane served 3 months of an 18-month sentence for manslaughter after killing a man in 2006 at the wedding of Frank Bainimarama's daughter. Now, the French Rugby Union, despite this, and despite an Amnesty International report that named Francis Keane as being a corrupt and horrible, objectionable individual who had done all sorts of terrible things to all sorts of people in Fiji, despite all that, the French Rugby Union decided to nominate him to be a member on the World Council. And Francis Keane, again, despite the conviction for manslaughter and despite the Amnesty International report, had been sat on the World Rugby. Now, I've got to get this right. He was sat on the World Rugby Council, I think, at the time, since 2018, without anybody saying anything. So it's, and then all of a sudden it came out, the Times revealed that he'd made homophobic comments on tape. And so he was rotated out of his role as chairman of Fiji Rugby. And that is a story that World Rugby have perpetuated, as the Pacific Players Welfare Association pointed out. He had to go because otherwise, something was going to happen. Now, World Rugby have refuted the report. They say they only basically negotiate with the International Players Association, which they fund. So they're having nothing to do with the Pacific Players Welfare Association at all. And they say that they refute allegations of undue influence in the recent voting, despite the fact that Fiji voted for Bernard Laporte and Bill Beaumont to be chairman and co-chairman, with the promise that Francis Keane, again, subject to an Amnesty International report, they were going to nominate him to the World Rugby's Executive Committee. Now, we've talked before, World Rugby's voting system is not transparent. It's all kind of favours and winks and nods and you vote for this for us and we'll do this for you. We know that. It's a pretty open secret, but I think to dismiss the concerns of the Pacific Players Welfare Association, which is at the, it's at the coalface of dealing with the issues of players, and we know how exploited Pacific players have been. It's not good enough to say we only deal with one player body, because the International Rugby Players Association was set up with out of a specific concern about player welfare, particularly around playing calendars, and I'm sure they would quite happily pick up the cause of Pacific players, but it's a very specific issue about those players being exploited and about the mismanagement of those unions as well. I mean, Tonga have just been banned today, this week, I think, from the Pacific Nations Cup because of financial irregularities. So there are, there are massive issues of, governance and political influence, particularly in Fiji and in Tonga, and how those unions are being run and how people are being treated in those countries. And it's not good enough for World Rugby to turn a blind eye for it. Again, it's supposed to be this, we're supposed to be a whiter than white, inclusive, fair, transparent sport. And then yet we're dismissing, a very vocal, very vocal and quite right. In a lot of cases, they've got very valid points to raise. You can't just dismiss and ignore what they have to say. You can't just write them off as, Daniel Leo off as a troublemaker, because the sorts of issues they're raising are well-known, well-publicized issues about how Pacific players are treated when they go to France. young players who go to France, and there've been cases of players committing suicide because of isolation, of being exploited out of their money, of being. I think there's one guy playing in Romania who was, became ill and didn't have the proper insurance and was, had to crowdfund to get back to the Pacific Island where he'd come from. So these are real ongoing issues. They're not going away, and it's not right for World Rugby just to dismiss them and ignore them.
Yeah, like what you're saying there, somebody being withheld medically, that's a humanitarian issue. They're basically sort of held to, I wouldn't quite say slavery, but
well, I think slavery. I think you could say in some cases some of these issues are still. It's guys being paid a pittance to go and play rugby in France. I mean, you call it what you want. It's pretty much slavery in some cases.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that Laporte and Beaumont would actively seek to have the backing of somebody who is a convicted. Is it murder or manslaughter?
It was manslaughter, but again, it's worth reading around that because
I
think, the fact the judge had to flee the country afterwards, and I think there was certainly there was witness intimidation.
So he's not the kind of gent that you think would pass a fit and proper persons test, although it depends who's running that test. No, it's just ridiculous, and Leo's maybe said a few things that would go against what we've been saying about sort of trans athletes, but obviously he's got a large body of players to look after, and like you said, the game would be so much less without them. And particularly Fiji. Fiji are a massive draw. They've got so many fantastic, wonderful players. Sevens champions. I mean, they were banned from the sevens, the Commonwealth Games sevens, because of political interference.
Yeah,
and and that would be Nico and Leon Nakarawa running out at 40,000 capacity Ibrox Stadium. People would have loved that, but that's been taken away because of political interference and the fact that Beaumont, Laporte, and other people are still willing to go along with the same people who have been at the Fiji rugby board for this length of time. It casts a really bad light on them, and also the fact that these things aren't shared to the rest of us.
And this is a guy that used his influence in the prison service to release a guy that had been convicted of rape early to attend training because he was a good rugby player. It's not that. I don't think that's the look that World Rugby are going for. Or it shouldn't be anyway.
I mean, we talk about inclusivity, but we don't want to include serial sex offenders. That's
that's true. Yes, I think we've got to draw the line somewhere, Ian, and I think serial sex offenders is probably where we would draw that. I think we're a wee bit beyond the line at that stage. To be fair, but I'm woke, but I'm not that woke. So yes, that's where we are with it. I think that's probably a good point as any to leave it.
What, serial sex offenders?
Serial sex offenders. We're on a high. Thank you very much, everyone. Very much for joining us. We hope to continue this again. Get in touch if you want to support us through our Patreon. It's patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast. I'm sure the super secret Facebook group will be lots and lots of fun to join. So yeah, sign up, support us. Much appreciated. We'll be back next week with some more chat.
And we'll do lots of Ben Skin impressions.
We will do lots of Ben Skin impressions. That's Ian's promise. If you join,
we could do something called the House of Bean.
Do you know what? This is a perfect chance, Ian, as part of our bonus content. And here's a teaser. We've talked for a while about writing a World Rugby sitcom. Shall we write a World Rugby? Let's write a World Rugby TMO sitcom.
It'll be like
and we'll do all the voices.
Yes, it'll be terrible but amazing.
There's a reason to part with the £3 or the £5 exclusive. We're going to at some point we'll put on a sitcom of
6-minute webisodes.
Yeah, of TMOs sharing hotel rooms at World Rugby tournaments.
Or we're all just in our own separate vans reviewing footage. Just going, one more angle.
Check on the complimentary tea there, Marys. So that's it from us from this week. We will see you next week. And I'm going to work out how to stop this now. For us, though, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Ian.